Tonight on Currents News, a college campus answering God's call no matter what.
They were supposed to join the faith this weekend. I'm Jessica Easthope with the story of new believers who won't let the crisis stop their journey.
Round-the-clock testing in New York on a drug that could be the cure everyone is hoping for. Plus, new questions tonight over how and where the outbreak got started. The U.S. is pointing to a Chinese lab. And a special report on the undetected killer that swept the globe 100 years ago, how the church came to the rescue.
It was so bad, priests were driving horse-drawn carts down the street, calling upon people to bring out their dead.
Music heard around the world, a violinist tribute that will tug at your heartstrings. The news starts now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. They want to become Catholics, and even though they'll have to wait because of the coronavirus crisis, their faith is still growing stronger by the day. Currents News' Jessica Easthope has the story from St. John's University.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son.
Receiving the sacraments. This is what that joyous day would have looked like for St. John's University's candidates coming through the Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults program. This year, it was supposed to happen on Sunday, but is postponed due to coronavirus.
When the pandemic hit, we were pretty much towards the end of our educational classes, so to speak. But RCIA is a faith journey.
Sister Pat Evanick works with faculty who are RCIA candidates. Since September, she's helped Jian Kim, an associate professor of biology, on her faith journey.
I go to Mass, and I'm spiritually renewed, and that kind of experience is not possible at non-Catholic universities.
This year's class is made up of 20 people. 11, like Gian, have prepared to receive all of their sacraments. The other 9 were baptized Catholic, but never followed through.
I stopped going to CCD when I was in elementary school because I didn't like being forced to go and I didn't feel any sort of connection to it.
Stephanie Digiorgio is a 21-year-old pharmacy student. She says when she started at St. John's, she couldn't help but answer a strong calling from God.
I fell in love with the church there, and that kind of just opened up my whole feeling of wanting to explore more of my faith.
Now being forced to cancel weekly meetings, the RCIA candidates' new faith is being tested. They can't hold hands or pray together, yet their connection is stronger than ever.
Texting each other every day, like, oh, I hope you guys are still praying, that like we're all in this together.
Sister Pat says knowing the candidates encourage each other confirms for her they already have something that can't be taught in religious instruction.
Their faith is built on really the small things, which I think is a challenge for us constantly to be in communion with God about.
The candidates are still praying and are hoping to make their sacraments next semester on September 20th. On Staten Island, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Reports tonight of a possible breakthrough in treating coronavirus at Montefiore Medical Center in the Bronx. The doctor leading up a new clinical trial is getting good results. Dr. Kathleen Mullane and her team are using remdesivir on severe COVID-19 patients, and they've been recovering quickly. Most are going home in less than a week. Full results from the trial are expected by the end of the month. Right now, hospitalizations in New York are down by almost 3% this week. Daily deaths are up to 630, bringing the statewide total to 12,822. At the same time, Mount Sinai Hospital is getting the go-ahead to fast-track its antibodies tests.
That as we learn more and use these tests to develop our plans and policies to reopen society, that we can rely on the results we're being given.
The FDA is giving Mount Sinai emergency authorization to use their antibody tests on people without virus symptoms. Stay with us for Dr. Robert Tabali in our new segment, Ask the Doctor. He'll be answering your questions and tell us more about using remdesivir on COVID-19 patients. That's still ahead in this newscast. President Trump is looking for governors to set the timetable for when their states go back to business.
Every state is very different. They're all beautiful. We love them all, but they're very, very different. If they need to remain closed, we will allow them to do that.
New York is closed until at least May 15th, but there's word tonight beaches in Jacksonville, Florida are reopening right now. After the U.S. accused China of hiding the scope of the epidemic from the world, Wuhan has revised the city's coronavirus death toll. Nearly 1,300 new deaths were added, raising the total to more than 3,800. The city also increased the total number of cases to more than 50,000. President Donald Trump has suggested that world leaders weren't adequately warned about the severity of the coronavirus. This, as a new report claims that China sat on critical information for several days, and the U.S. investigates what many call a conspiracy theory. At the start of the outbreak, this is where China directed the world's attention, suggesting that this Wuhan seafood market was the source of the novel coronavirus outbreak. U.S. intelligence officials say they are now investigating another possible source, suggesting the virus may not have been originated naturally, as China has advertised, but rather that it possibly started in a Wuhan lab. Sources say it is one of the many origin theories the U.S. is looking into. Chinese officials pushing back against that claim, the foreign ministry spokesperson dismissing that the virus started in a lab, instead stressing that this is a scientific issue that should be studied by scientists and medical experts. Yet it is the same spokesperson who last month floated a controversial theory, tweeting that it might be the U.S. Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan.
China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen, not as long as I'm president. It comes from China.
The latest debate over the virus's actual origin coincides with a damning Associated Press report. It claims China sat on critical information for 6 full days from January 14th until January 20th, downplaying the outbreak in public before finally revealing the full scope of the threat. The report is based on what the AP characterizes as a memo from a January 14th confidential teleconference involving the head of China's National Health Commission. According to CNN, the government's public report of that teleconference, which was released more than a month after it took place, says a sober understanding of the situation was made known to top Chinese government officials, adding that clustered cases suggest that human-to-human transmission is possible. But that was not the message shared publicly from health officials at the time. In fact, as hundreds of millions traveled leading up to the Lunar New Year holiday, mass gatherings at airports and railway stations, the Wuhan Health Commission maintained that the outbreak was controllable and preventable and that it was not contagious. It was not until January 20th did leading health officials acknowledge publicly cases of human-to-human transmission. China has repeatedly maintained that they have been open and forthcoming in their handling of the outbreak. China's economy tanked during the first 3 months of the year as the country shut down because of the pandemic. Output from the world's second largest economy contracted by almost 7%. That breaks a streak of growth almost 50 years long. The coronavirus crisis has sharply cut the world's appetite for Chinese goods. There's a lot more news headed your way. It was a different pandemic, but the helpers came out just the same. We'll tell you about the heroes and habits that helped during the Spanish flu. Plus, another week, another round of questions. The doctor is in and he's answering yours. And she beat coronavirus, but that wasn't even the best part of her day. We'll explain when we come back.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
The influenza outbreak of 1918, also known as the Spanish flu, is considered one of the deadliest pandemics in history. Much like the coronavirus, it plunged the world into chaos. But just like today, heroes emerged. Currents News' Michelle Powers takes us back to a tragic time when the church, and especially women of faith, were called into action.
The Battle Royal.
It was an undetected killer sweeping the globe as the world was in the throes of a deadly war. a virus so relentless it infected 1/3 of the world's population and killed an estimated 50 million people.
Adjusted for population today would equal about 220 to 440 million people.
675,000 perished in the United States alone. Author John Barry has written extensively about the Great Influenza, calling its impact lethal.
The 1918 pandemic killed roughly 2/3 of the people in a matter of weeks. It also concentrated on otherwise healthy young adults. The peak age for death was 28.
With no vaccine or medicines to combat disease, the Spanish influenza, considered one of the worst pandemics in modern-day history, quickly overwhelmed the medical community. As infections soared, Catholic sisters from all over the country were called to serve in new and profound ways.
They saw terrible things.
Sister Margaret Donegan has researched the extraordinary efforts of 14 Sisters of Charity who traveled to the rural mining town of Shamokin, Pennsylvania, a tiny community placed under martial law and surrounded by state police because of the high levels of the contagion.
They were bringing comfort to the patients. They would hold their hands, they would talk to them, they would pray for them. They would listen to their stories.
Stories so heartbreaking, they wrote their Mother Superior to tell her.
They had seen things they could never write about, and they had seen things they could never possibly imagine.
Women of faith doing whatever was necessary to relieve the suffering.
They went into homes and they saw parents who had died and children huddled together. They listened to fathers saying, they were the breadwinners. What was going to happen to their wife and to their children? They saw mothers pleading to God to cure them because of the children who were at home.
From mining communities in rural Pennsylvania to makeshift encampments in Ohio and Massachusetts, these women cared for the stricken in hospitals, tented clinics, even private homes, many with little or no medical experience.
Putting their lives on the line to care for not only the Catholics of Philadelphia, but any person of any faith.
In Philadelphia, one of the nation's hardest hit cities, over 2,000 women religious were called into action. At least 23 of them lost their lives in the fight. A sacrifice the Catholic Historical Society of Philadelphia wants us all to remember.
It's really remarkable how quickly they all came together, just the church as a whole, in organizing and having such a cohesive response to this pandemic. They were really focused on helping as many people as they could.
Philadelphia, it was so bad, priests were driving horse-drawn carts down the street, calling upon people to bring out their dead. They were digging mass graves.
100 years later, their example still shines as a model of courage and sacrifice. Sisters putting the needs of others before themselves, remembered by a grateful community and by one of their own.
They were bringing the compassion of Jesus to these people because they were not nurses, but what could they do but bring the compassion of Jesus to the suffering?
Women of faith, forever on the front lines, answering the call in service to God and country. Michelle Powers, Currents News.
Now, more than 100 years later, while we have more tools and knowledge to combat a pandemic, there are still so many unanswered questions. Here on Currents News, we're trying to answer your questions in our weekly segment, Ask the Doctor. Joining me now is Dr. Robert Tabali from the Catholic Medical Association. And Dr. Tabali, I'm just finding out now that you actually had the coronavirus. Tell us, what was that like and how are you feeling now?
Well, I had it for about 2 weeks, and like many patients, I felt kind of poorly initially, felt better, and then had a sudden worsening. I was not admitted to a hospital, and therefore here in Illinois, I didn't meet criteria to have a test done, a nasal swab. But I did recover. I feel much better now, and I got a blood test that's much talked about these days, and I was positive on the antibodies, so I definitely did have it. Fortunately, no one else in my office or people around me that I know of did I give it to them. But my wife still doesn't trust me. She walks around the house with a face mask on now. So,
Well, I don't blame her, and I'm glad to hear that you are doing better. And I want to get to one of our questions from our viewers tonight. Judy wants to know, if we take Tylenol before going food shopping, could it help to ward off the virus?
that's a good question, insightful, but probably Tylenol would not be helpful at all. It's really covers symptoms like fever and pain and aches, but it doesn't do anything to prevent acquisition of this virus. You would want to go out with a mask on. You would want to go out and have some gloves to pick things up and so on. But taking Tylenol won't be helpful.
All right, our next question. A study recently published in the New England Journal of Medicine showed more than 2/3 of patients who were severely ill with COVID-19 improved after being treated with the drug remdesivir. And Bronx Hospital is actually using it in clinical trials. It sounds promising. What do you think?
Oh, I'm very excited about it. A couple of months ago, there was early news out of China that it was very, very helpful. And the first patient in the United States in Washington State actually was treated with remdesivir when they had a very significant worsening. And he was discharged from the hospital 2 days later.
Wow.
So it's an intravenous medicine, so it's not for everyone.
Okay.
But there are some other similar medicines that are appear to be highly effective. Favipiravir, which is also known as Avigan, which is a Japanese medicine, may be very helpful. But it similarly showed dramatic improvement in patients in China with a complete cessation of virus production after 4 days of therapy. But that's a pill. Favipiravir. Yeah. So there's a number of medicines that appear to be very promising to treat patients that are severely ill. Again, the remdesivir needs to be given early. You can't give it to someone who's in multisystem organ failure, kidney failure, respiratory failure, and expect them to improve. But it's an early therapy, and the company's actually been revving up production of the medicine. It may be widely available soon, very soon.
All right, that's good news. And are doctors looking into whether having the seasonal flu vaccine offers any type of protection against COVID-19?
To my knowledge, no. We do know that the antibodies from seasonal flu do not cross-react with antibodies from this, scientists call this SARS-CoV-2 or SARS-CoV-2, the COVID-19. So I would, it's possible there could be some improvement, but it's unlikely that flu vaccine. Other people are asking, could yellow fever vaccination status help protect in the situation? That's an interesting thought, but probably not. There really isn't anything, even being infected with the seasonal cold virus, coronaviruses, there's multiple others that circulate but don't cause this type of illness. They don't cross-react with this virus either. They're not cross-protective.
All right, we have so many more questions, but we'll save them for next week. Dr. Robert Tavalli from the Catholic Medical Association, thanks so much for joining us.
Okay, stay safe. Happy Easter.
The doctor is in every Friday to tell you what you need to know about the latest medical developments involving the coronavirus and answer your questions. So send them to askthedoctor@desalesmedia.org. We'll try to get to all of them. That way you can be safe and healthy. Again, the email is askthedoctor@desalesmedia.org. A funeral home in Tennessee is trying to help grieving people in an unusual way. It's offering drive-through services so mourners can say goodbye while maintaining social distancing. The services are possible because the business took over an old bank building. A California nursing home is also fighting isolation in another innovative way with an 8x8 plexiglass cubicle. The manager of the senior living facility constructed the cubicle in his garage after receiving desperate calls from clients missing their loved ones. The community schedules several meetings a day, and the barrier gets disinfected between each visit. And a happy ending to a miraculous story. Angela Primachenko gave birth to her baby while in a medically induced coma because of COVID-19. Now she is coronavirus free and can finally hold her baby. In an Instagram post, Angela says she is planning on bringing her little sunshine home this weekend. Still to come on Currents News, she was given no hope, but she says God gave her a miracle. And The Italian city of violins fell silent except for the sounds of one violin. We'll tell you why. Tonight, a story about beating the odds. One mother thought her daughter would never make it out of the hospital alive when she tested positive for COVID-19. Doctors told her to give up hope, but instead, Zoila Argudo says God performed a miracle. Alex Miranda has the story from Miami.
This mother is so elated, she's trembling.
I'm very nervous. I would like to cry but the happiness, because I really was lost without my daughter.
When her daughter, Pamela Rosero, got the COVID-19 diagnosis, the devastation was unimaginable.
It was terrible for me. My legs almost fell down.
Pamela has Down syndrome. Her underlying medical conditions put her at a much higher risk of mortality. The doctors told Zoila the prognosis was grim.
The doctor said, there is no hope for your daughter.
Pamela spent 15 days in the hospital, 10 in the ICU. Her mom wishing for the best, but fearing the worst. Something she says no parent should ever have to go through.
Can you think, maybe you are a father of a family, I was terrible devastated.
That is until Wednesday afternoon. This is the moment Pamela first went through those double exit doors at Kendall Regional Medical Center, recovered from the coronavirus and ready to go home. Thanking all the doctors, nurses, and medical staff who helped Pamela stay strong, all Zoila could feel was gratitude.
I just have a lot of faith in God. I believe in God. It was the best thing being in this hospital. They did a very, very nice job. Excellent.
That was Alex Miranda reporting from Miami. Sisters in Spain took a break from mask making to play a game of full court basketball. And let's just say they know how to run and gun, or none and gun. With the NBA off the airwaves, this video has gone viral, receiving millions of views. Before the lockdown, the sisters from Sevilla used to make famous sweets. With a lack of personal protective equipment plaguing the country, they started sewing hundreds of face masks. And in their spare time, they face off. In these ever-changing times, you need to know what's happening in the Diocese of Brooklyn and around the world. Starting tomorrow, we're going to air Currents News Weekend Edition. The newscast will be televised at 7:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. on both Saturday and Sunday, right here on Net TV, New York's Catholic station. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. We leave you tonight with a moving tribute from a rooftop in Italy. For just a few moments, the ambulance sirens were replaced by the sweet music of a violin, a melody both sad and hopeful, played for the workers on the front lines. Good night.